Hey there, deep divers. It's Julie B, and today I'm diving into the mind-blowing, epic blockbuster season finale that was Severance Season 2, Episode 10, Cold Harbor. We got huge reveals to some of the show's biggest mysteries, game-changing plot twists, some old questions unexpectedly answered, and at the heart of it all was Mark's internal battle within himself, the tension between the wants and needs of his Innie versus his outie. And as the episode races to its heart-pounding conclusion, it seems that we're on the cusp of an all-out Innie revolution, a long overdue uprising of an oppressed class of people against their overlords. So without further ado, let's get into it. The battle between Innie Mark versus Outie Mark that drives this finale, a battle that has been foreshadowed starting with the new opening credit sequence this season, begins at the birthing cabin, where Innie Mark shares vital information with Cobell, Devon, and Outie Mark. To simplify things, let's call them I Mark and O Mark. I Mark reveals that he hasn't yet completed Cold Harbor, crucial information for them to have, and Cobell in turn tells him that after he does so, Lumon will kill Gemma if he doesn't help them save her. I Mark reveals to them that he has directions to get to the export hall via Irving's map. Cobell tells him to finish the Cold Harbor file because they won't allow him to leave MDR until he completes it. Then he'll need to get to the testing floor as soon as possible to save Gemma. Cobell says when he gets there, his chip will automatically switch to outie mode. His outie will need to find Gemma, and then he, as the Innie, will need to take over to get her out via the stairwell on the severed floor. Devon implores Imark to listen because if they can prove that Lumon kidnapped Gemma, it will end them. But the problem is that Devon, Cobell, and Omark are not considering what will happen to the Innies. They aren't thinking of what Imark would have to sacrifice, or placing sufficient value on the lives of Innies. It seems like it hasn't even occurred to them that their plan to take down Lumon would effectively end the lives of all the Innies, let alone that their lives have value. Imark calls all of them out on this. He points out, "You want me to give my life, the lives of everyone down there, just to save one person you happen to care about." He backs off for a bit, though, when they give him a video camera enabling him to actually have a conversation with Omark, who explains to him why, as Cobell says, this doesn't have to end his life. Imark and Omark proceed to have a conversation by recording messages to each other, as Imark transitions back into Omark each time he steps onto a balcony outside. This is an awesome twist. The first time we've seen an Innie and Outie gain the chance to have an unfiltered conversation without Lumon as an intermediary. Omark is emotionally manipulative of Imark. He apologizes for creating Imark in the first place, which does show remorse for bringing him into the world without his permission, as Ragabi had once said he did, just to suffer at Lumon. He admits what we already knew, that he had created Imark to escape from the grief over what he thought was his wife's death, hiding all her things in the basement because it was easier to pretend she never existed. This strikes at the central theme of Severance, the concept of coping with trauma by burying the pain, and it's what the cult of Kyr is all about. That's why he selfishly created Imark, as he tells it, but he's here to make it right. However, this is a lie. He's only here so they can try to enlist Imark in saving Gemma. He also refers to Imark's life as a nightmare, but Imark corrects him and says that they don't see it that way. They find ways to make it work and feel whole. So Omark's request scares him because these lives are all they have and they don't want them to end. Omark explains the reintegration process and promises that once his wife is free, he'll finish that process so that Imark's life won't end because, quote, "our life belongs to both of us," unquote, as he says, claiming he wants to share it. But he says, "my wife, not our wife," so clearly he thinks of Gemma as his wife only. In season 1, when Ragabi had implored him to reintegrate because creating Imark was wrong, he had refused. The only reason he changed his mind this season was because he found out Gemma is alive and trapped there, and then he immediately agreed. So I actually agree with Imark when he becomes agitated and says that once Omark gets his wife back, he'd probably lose his incentive to continue the reintegration process, allowing Imark and all the other Innies to be wiped out as they try to take down Lumon. The reintegration process is experimental and dangerous. It led to Petey's death in season 1, and Cobell implied this season that Ragabi would have wound up killing Mark that way, too. I can understand him not wanting to complete it, so this is a quandary here, and we can empathize with both versions of Mark. Both of them feel their lives have value and they just want to be with the women they love. Mark correctly points out that he'll lose the woman he loves if he enacts their plan, because Helena won't undergo reintegration. But they aren't taking that into consideration, and they've only taken an interest in his life now because they need his help. Sure, Mark is childish and naive, but he's right that his life has value, and this group at the cabin just isn't taking that into consideration. And he's right to be concerned that even if Omark follows through on reintegration, this new hybrid person might be more Omark than Imark, since Omark has existed for much longer. After the two versions of Mark get into a shouting match, Cobell speaks to Imark alone and drops the reveal that the numbers he's been refining are balancing the tempers in the mind of Gemma. This confirms the theory that I put out after the season 2 premiere that he's been configuring the chip in his wife's brain, which was strongly suggested by the split-second image that flashed on the screen at the end of that episode. It showed the Cold Harbor file, Gemma's face and vital signs, percentage of completion, and 5 bins at the bottom of the screen that matched the bins on the MDR team's screens. Cobell tells Imark that tomorrow will be his last day at Lumon, that he will have served his purpose and so will Gemma. Now, for Gemma, it sounds like this would mean her literal death was coming, but for Mark, I think this just means he'd be laid off, and therefore his Innie would effectively die, just like they retired Bert's Innie and laid off the MDR replacements in the season 2 premiere. Cobell warns that there can be no honeymoon ending for him and Helly because she's an Egan. He's nothing to them and to her, and they're just using him before they throw him away. And she's correct about that, but Imark just storms out and demands that they let him return to work. Now, is Cobell being honest that she cares about Mark? I doubt she truly cares for him on a personal level. If Lumon hadn't ousted her, she'd probably still be one of his oppressors. She has a personal vendetta against them now, out for vengeance. It doesn't mean she won't double-cross Mark later, too, so they should be careful about trusting her. She's been brainwashed into the cult of Kier since childhood, and it's not an easy task to deprogram oneself from something like that. Furthermore, Cobell also confirms what many of us fans pieced together from episode 7, that every file Mark has worked on corresponds to a separate Innie of Gemma and a separate room on the testing floor. We saw that the rooms on that floor correspond to file names on the MDR computers. Furious at the entire group, Imark demands to be sent back to Lumon and storms out, and we see from his perspective that the next time he awakens, he is back on the severed floor. When he arrives, coming off the elevator, he sees a brand new painting commemorating his expected completion of the Cold Harbor file that day. Mark is at the center, looking like a messianic figure with his computer at Woe's Hollow, of all places, with the entire cast of Severance, including the minor characters, assembled all around him. Then Helly and Mark proceed to MDR, where they find the Kier wax figure ominously waiting for them with a note for Mark, implying that he'll receive a waffle party as a reward for completing Cold Harbor. Helly recounts to Mark how Jaime Egan had shown up and told her that today would be a special day. He had also admitted that he doesn't love his daughter Helena because he used to see Kier in her but doesn't anymore. He says he's sired others in the shadows, but he didn't see Kier in them either. This explains why the odd exchange between Cobell and the guard at the birthing cabins happened. Cobell had said Devon is one of Mr. Egan's, and then they spoke to each other in code and she let them in. Apparently, he's been impregnating women to try to father a child in whom he sees the fire of Kier again. However, James says he sees Kier in Helly, confirming what I had suspected, that he idealizes Helly because her severance chip restored her to the more innocent version of his daughter he loved as a child. It's odd, because Helly is rebellious and headstrong, while Helena is docile and obedient to him. Yet he prefers Helly. As a matter of fact, when Helly jumps up and fires at him, "You and your family created hell and you're going to burn in it," James actually likes that. He says, "There he is," seeing Kier in her, apparently. So it seems that her spirited personality is what makes him appreciate her. Did Kier have a fiery persona like hers? It would seem that way. Incidentally, Helly's statement is a callback to the season 1 premiere called Good News About Hell, in which Cobell told Mark that her mother said the good news about hell is that it's made up, but the bad news is that what humans imagine, they can usually create. Lumon has created a kind of hell for the Innies who are trapped there. Mark explains to Helly that he learned from Cobell when he finishes Cold Harbor, she said they'll kill Gemma and extract her chip. They doubt whether they can trust Cobell, and they're right to be concerned about that. Again, she could still double-cross them to get back in Lumon's good graces. Mark considers not cooperating with Cobell's plan, but Helly says maybe if he gets Gemma out, that will take down Lumon, he can reintegrate, and he'll at least have a chance at living. She's being truly selfless here. Because she loves him, she's willing to give up her own life as an Innie if he can get his wife out and have a life with her. That would effectively mean that she and the other Innies would die. Mark says he wants to live with her, and she points out, but I'm her, meaning that she is essentially Helena, that at her core she's the same person. They can never have a future together outside of Lumon. Meanwhile, the nurse on the testing floor shows Gemma her outfit for the day, and it's the same one that she had worn on the last night she saw Mark, before she became a prisoner at Lumon. Thus, she seems afraid, like she knows this is a bad sign, and she's right about that. The nurse escorts her toward the Cold Harbor room after that. As for Dylan, his outie declines his resignation request, but leaves him a note to tell him that he understands why he'd fall for Gretchen. Notably, he gives Innie Dylan the choice to leave if he were to make another request, but he thinks Dylan should stay and continue to live. As Mark tearfully gets closer to completing Cold Harbor, Helly says she's been trying to think of other place names besides Delaware. So apparently, the Innies have very limited knowledge of the world, and probably many other things other than what they absolutely need to know to do their jobs. She brings up the equator, and neither of them know what it is. Mark wonders if it's a building. I think this is a metaphor, but more on that later. Then Mark completes Cold Harbor with Helly's support. This kicks off a hilarious series of events, bringing back the surreal, absurdist comedy that was more prevalent in Season 1. The Kier wax figure starts talking. He's been upgraded to an animatronic figure, which was foreshadowed in the Season 2 premiere by Gwendolyn, who said her old branch had animatronic figures. He congratulates Mark on his achievement and declares that this makes Mark one of the most important people in history, bringing Kier's grand agendum nearer to fulfillment, which implies that this is not the endgame. There are still more steps to Lumon's ambition for what I think is world domination by spreading their chips worldwide. The Kier figure introduces Milchick, and what follows is like a parody of an old vaudeville routine, with the two of them trading barbs in between bouts of canned laughter. Milchick even takes a shot at Kier's height, noting that the real Kier was 5 inches shorter than this figure. I suspect this was an ad-lib by Milchick, who's tired of being beaten down by this company. And then the surreal absurdity continues as a marching band shows up, a severed department that MDR didn't know existed. Choreography and merriment, playing the Kier hymn. At one point, they even spin the 3 connected cubicles around, and with the aerial view, it looks like a windmill. Imagery befitting the song that plays at the end of the episode, The Windmills of Your Mind, thus foreshadowing the choice that Mark ultimately makes in the end. Then C&M plays another song from the Kier cult, the Ballad of Ambrose and Gunnell, 2 other Egan CEOs, incidentally, and Milchick breaks out into a hilarious dance that actually manages to top his legendary music dance experience scene in Season 1. As the songs go on, Mark and Helly execute their plan, with Helly telling Mark, "I'll see you at the equator," which is definitely code for the location where they ultimately meet at the end of the episode, near the stairwell where they can change from Innie to outie, with that threshold symbolizing the equator. Helly creates a diversion so Mark can slip away. She grabs Milchick's walkie-talkie, runs into the bathroom, then manages to trick him and trap him inside. She tries to get anyone from the band to help her to keep the door shut, but they all just keep playing like a bunch of robots. thoroughly brainwashed to continue doing their jobs no matter what chaos is going on around them, apparently. Then Dylan arrives at MDR just in time to save the day, pushing their vending machine in front of the bathroom doorway to trap Milchick inside. His outie had called him a self-assured badass, and actually envies that about him, which seems to have built his confidence back up. And once again, 2 season finales in a row, Dylan saves the day as the MVP. And then comes the big reveal we've been waiting for, the Cold Harbor room we've heard about all season long. Dr. Maurer watches via a camera in another room, while James Egan also watches via camera in a room by himself. And what's waiting for Gemma behind that door is simply an empty crib. Many of us as fans were just overthinking what this room could be. It makes perfect sense that it's just a crib. This represents Gemma's deepest, most painful trauma. Thus, it is the ultimate test of her severance barriers. If she can confront this as an Innie without remembering anything about her infertility battle that we learned about in episode 7 this season, then Lumon will have completed the refinement of her chip and be able to market this as a way for people worldwide to avoid having to experience any unpleasant emotions. Via a speaker, Dr. Maurer orders her to enter the room and asks her who she is, and of course she doesn't know. This is the question they ask all new Innies, like they did with Helly in season 1. But unlike Helly, note that Gemma is not frantic nor rebellious. She seems anxious and hesitant, but she's not in a panic like Helly had been when she first woke up on the table as an Innie at Lumon. And I think this is because Gemma has been severed so many times over, and she's been desensitized to everything from minor annoyances, like writing thank you notes, to anxiety-inducing experiences, like going to the dentist, to terrifying ordeals, like a simulated plane crash. So at this point, Gemma's emotions are flattened a great deal when the chip is activated. They clearly saved the Cold Harbor room for last because they were working their way up to it, waiting for her to become as desensitized as possible. As Maurer and James watch from their separate rooms, following Maurer's orders, Gemma takes the crib apart with a screwdriver, an elegant metaphor for her deconstructing her trauma. As she complies with the instructions, Billie Holiday's I'll Be Seeing You plays through speakers, a song that was featured in season 1 when Ms. Casey was revealed to be Gemma, and in season 2, episode 7, it was also playing in Gemma's living quarters at Lumon. So I'm thinking this was probably Mark and Gemma's song as a couple. Thus, it's also part of the test of her severance barrier to make sure that she doesn't remember anything. Music is deeply tied to memory, after all. When Gemma finishes taking apart the crib, Dr. Maurer says, "The barrier is holding. She feels nothing. It's beautiful." Remember, the mission of the cult of Kyr is to suppress all negative emotions, to bury pain. Case in point, at the same time as Drummond is about to sacrifice a baby goat, he says, "We commit this animal to Kyr and his eternal war against pain." This statement supports my theory that the main goal of the cult of Kyr is to eradicate negative emotions. Not with altruistic motives, though. All cults are ultimately about controlling people at the end of the day. This scene comes after Drummond enters a secret room, where he greets Lorne from Mammalian's Nurturable, and she's delivering this baby goat to the slaughter. So that's an unexpected reveal. Finally, we get an answer on why the goats are here in the first place. The cult of Kyr actually uses them for blood sacrifice, not just test subjects for the chips. Retrieving a gun with a single bullet, Drummond says, "This beast will be entombed with a cherished woman whose spirit it must guide to Kyr's door." Thus, their ritual seems to be that they sacrifice a baby goat to bury with their test subjects. Lorne asks, "How many more must I give?" looking traumatized by the experience. So they've definitely done this before. In season 1, we learned that the majority of MDR's files go uncompleted, so maybe this means that other test subjects were failures, and each of them was killed after the fact, along with the goat. Drummond says she must give as many as the founder calls, so they probably plan to do this again with more test subjects. But they're interrupted when they hear Mark outside trying to break into the export hall. As Mark tries to leave, Drummond slams him into a wall and punches him in the face. While there has always been the strong implication that Lumon is capable of violence, this is the first time we've actually seen it on screen. In Season 1, Mark once left the break room with marks on his knuckles, implying that Lumon physically hurt him, but they sent him home with a bogus explanation for what had happened. Of course, we learned in Season 2 that Lumon has been holding Gemma prisoner, and Cobell has been in hiding from them, just as Petey was running for his life from them in Season 1. But now we finally see violence firsthand, and it's extreme. Drummond slams Mark into the walls repeatedly and throws him around like a rag doll, just about to choke him to death when Lorne points the gun to his head and says, "No more killing." Again, this statement implies that she's seen Lumon kill test subjects before, and goats. She can't tolerate it any longer, and her pent-up rage comes gushing out as she and Drummond get into a fight of their own. She manages to knock him to the floor as Mark holds his neck by his tie and she pummels his face. But Mark stops her from shooting Drummond because he needs him to get to the testing floor. Taking Drummond at gunpoint to the testing floor elevator, Mark accidentally shoots and kills him when he transitions to his outie, with a darkly comical amount of blood spraying everywhere. Then he's left to find the Cold Harbor room on his own. Meanwhile, Helly and Dylan struggle to keep Milchick from escaping from the bathroom as the band obliviously still plays on. They really do seem deeply programmed to do this job. When Milchick calls for them to return to their department, the band leader blows a whistle and orders his people to fall back to C&M, as if they're a military unit. But Helly makes a stirring speech to try to win C&M over to their cause, explaining how Lumon got rid of Irving, effectively killing his Innie, and if Milchick gets out, they'll all be dead too. Pleading with them for help, she tells them, "They're gonna turn us off like effing machines. You've seen them do it. I know you lost friends too, and you could be next. They give us half a life and think we won't fight for it." Now, her words seem to be having an effect on the C&M band as they watch her silently, and we get several shots of their expressions as they listen to what she has to say. Indeed, Lumon has grossly underestimated what Innies are capable of doing. It's why they thought they could keep all the Innies under control with a skeleton crew of management and security on the severed floor. They never even replaced Grainer as the only security staff member there after he died in Season 1, even after the OTC Macrodat rebellion of the Season 1 finale. The Innies outnumber their overlords exponentially, but Lumon's management got complacent and their hubris continues to cloud their judgment. It shouldn't have been so easy for the MDR team to access the security room and stage that Macrodat rebellion, just as right now it shouldn't be this easy for Mark to find Gemma on the testing floor. Locating the Cold Harbor room, Mark demands that the nurse open the door, and when she refuses, he just drives her away by brandishing his gun and screaming at her. Then he figures out how to gain access using Drummond's blood that soaks his tie. Inside, Mark approaches Gemma. He's her husband, and they can get their life together back if she comes with him. Through the speaker, Dr. Maurer tells Gemma not to speak to him or let him touch her, that he's here to hurt her. But despite her fear of Mark and defensiveness at first, Gemma responds to him instinctively, takes his hand, and leaves with him, giving us strong evidence that love can transcend severance, as I've posited in past videos. Gemma doesn't seem to remember who he is at all, but her feelings for him are the likely reason why he was able to disarm her and convince her to trust him enough to leave with him. The memories weren't there, but the feelings bled through. It was the same on the outside with Irving and Bert. They didn't remember being together as Innies, but their feelings bled through to their outies. Gemma's overlords proceed to panic. Jaime Egan screams with rage. Maurer goes running to stop Mark and Gemma, and the nurse yells for Maurer to call Drummond. Exiting the Cold Harbor room, Gemma turns back into her outie and has a brief, bittersweet reunion with outie Mark before they have to run for the elevator. The first time they've been together since Lumon faked her death years before. As red flashing emergency lights are triggered and the severed floor and testing floor go on lockdown, back in MDR, Helly has a look of recognition and satisfaction on her face, seeming to understand that the red flashing lights must mean that Mark has found Gemma according to the plan. And she's happy for both of them. She loves Mark in a selfless way and has always wanted him to free his outie's wife, even if it might mean he chooses to leave and be with Gemma. I've seen theories that the expression on her face here is a clue that she's really Helena, but I disagree. She and Mark had hatched this plan to free Gemma, and the emergency lights are evidence that the plan is working, so she's glad, in my opinion. Meanwhile, in the bathroom, Milchick looks dejected as he knows that he's failed Lumon yet again, and he'll be blamed for whatever mayhem is going down, ruining what is supposed to be the greatest day in the company's history. He looks in a mirror, just as he did after his abysmal performance review, as if disgusted and ashamed of himself. Maurer chases Mark and Gemma to the elevator but just misses them, yelling for Gemma to stop, saying, "You'll kill them all." He means that by leaving, Gemma will effectively kill her 26 innies, which is true, and he's become infatuated with her apparently, so he probably loves each and every one of them equally. In the elevator, Mark and Gemma are in the middle of a kiss when they transition back to Innie form, to their utter confusion. But he's able to get Gemma, aka Miss Casey, to run with him for the stairwell exit. Galvanized by the prospect of yet another failure, Milchick summons the strength to topple the vending machine, trapping him in the bathroom. Crouching atop it, he is greeted by the entire C&M band, forming a united front with Dylan, who repeats his memorable line to Milchick from the Season 1 finale, "F you, Mr. Milchick." Paralleling that finale, once again, Dylan had managed to keep Milchick out of a certain area and thereby helped his team achieve another coup. As the red lights continue flashing, with this militaristic marching band flanking Dylan and staring Milchick down, it evokes the sense that a revolution is afoot. Red is a color that's symbolic of rebellion, danger, anger, and warning. When Mark and Gemma reach the stairwell, he convinces her to go out the door, telling her, "You have to go now." He doesn't say we, he says you. I don't think he ever really intended to go with her. He does seem to consider doing it, as we see a point of view shot of his hands hovering over the exit door, but I think he knew all along that he couldn't bring himself to leave Helly behind. Just as the episode opened with the battle between the two Marks, it closes with this tension between the wants and needs of I-Mark versus O-Mark. O-Mark had just experienced a joyous reunion with his beloved wife, but now he's I-Mark again, and the woman he loves is Helly. Once Gemma is in the stairwell, she turns back to her outie, crying and pleading with him to come with her. She frantically tries to open the door, but the severed floor is clearly on lockdown, so she's unable to get back in. Turning around, Mark sees Helly behind him, which I'm sure was the plan, for her to meet him there. Their code phrase had been, "See you at the equator." That's what they said to each other as Mark ran off to free Gemma. This area with the stairwell is a fitting analogy for the equator, which severs the Earth into two halves, if you will, because it represents the boundary between the Innie and outie selves. So I think the intention was for Helly to meet Mark there, and he would make his choice on whether to stay with her or to go with Gemma and say goodbye to Helly there. But in his heart, I think he always knew he couldn't leave her. He had told her in this very episode, "I want a life with you," even when she pushed him to find Gemma and have a shot at living outside Lumon. Regardless of the fact that Mark and Helly want to be together, they at least wanted to free Gemma, who would have been killed by Lumon if they hadn't intervened. Now, why this was Lumon's intention is unclear. If they're trying to build a severance chip to market to the masses that will desensitize people to pain and discomfort, then they should have a live woman as proof that it's possible to present to the world as a living prototype. But of course, there's the messy matter of the fact that they faked her death and held her prisoner. That would be hard to explain. So I think the company was planning to take Gemma's chip and implant it in a new volunteer, and then present that volunteer to the world. In any event, Mark makes his choice, goes back to Helly, and they run off into the sunset together in what looks like a war zone now, with what may be an all-out Innie revolution underway. The Windmills of Your Mind, sung by Mel Torme, begins to play, a fitting send-off as they run through the circuitous hallways that represent the pathways in the human brain. Now, what comes next? It's clear that nothing will ever be the same on this show after the events of this explosive finale. There's no way that the MDR department can just go back to business as usual in Season 3, like they managed to essentially do in Season 2 after the Macrodat Rebellion. Where can Mark and Helly even run to that will offer them any degree of safety? Mark has just thwarted Lumon's grand plan for Gemma and her chip, releasing her into the world where she could expose them for kidnapping and imprisoning her. He's also just killed Drummond, assisted by Lorne from the goat department, while Helly and Dylan trapped Milchick in the bathroom to help facilitate, aid, and abet Mark's plan. These actions are far more serious than merely staging the OTC Macrodat rebellion, waking up their innies on the outside. This is entirely different. There can be no coming back from this, no kindness reforms put in place for them, and no just letting them all go free at this point. I predict that Lumon will keep Mark, Dylan, and possibly even Helly trapped there, and instead of Mark rescuing Gemma, it will now become Gemma's mission to rescue Mark with the help of Devon and Cobell. And the innies from MDR, Mammalians Nurturable, O&D, and C&M will band together to stage a revolution. I also predict that Devon will be waiting in the Lumon parking lot to take Gemma away to a safe, hidden location. Gemma, Cobell, and possibly Devon and Rickon will need to stay in hiding from Lumon, with their lives in jeopardy. As for Helly, I think that James Egan will let her stay right where she is, on the severed floor. He admitted in this episode that he doesn't love his daughter anyway, and he actually prefers Helly, so I think he'll probably just leave her there, even with an Innie revolution possibly underway. James is furious at Mark's sabotage of his plan for Gemma, so even though he's been fond of Helly, he'll probably be upset with her because she aided and abetted that sabotage. And he doesn't care about Helena anyway, so he'll probably just let Helly stay down there and suffer the consequences of her actions along with Mark and Dylan. While they'll need to be in hiding, I predict Gemma and Devon will join forces against Lumon, possibly with Cobell's help. Although, once again, Cobell could still double-cross them and try to gain control of Lumon for herself. The anti-Severance group, the Whole Mind Collective, could assist them all, and maybe Ragabi, too. Hopefully, Irving will return to the town of Kier and join the resistance movement, but stay in hiding, too, rather than just leaving the show. Bert had warned him that he can never come back to the town of Kier, because clearly his life is in jeopardy now and Lumon wants him dead. But it's hard to imagine him just leaving the show. Now, I want to know what you think. What did you think of Mark's decision to stay at Lumon with Helly? Where could the game-changing events of this finale lead us in Season 3? Could there be a kind of revolution, or is this just not possible because Lumon has too much control over the innies via the chips in their heads? After all, let's not forget that the chips have other functions that we haven't learned about yet, which were teased in the Season 1 finale. Do you think Cobell will be an ally to Gemma and Devon, or will she double-cross them? Will Mark, Helly, and Dylan be trapped at Lumon or allowed to leave? Let me know your thoughts and theories down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe, and until next time, keep on deep diving, and let's see what we can uncover together.